And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You're tuned in to Tapped Out. Hosted by Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine. Only on the BetQL Network.
And welcome into your Thanksgiving week edition of Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin. I am the sports machine, Sean Levine, as always produced by our good friend Jake Nowicker. Happy holidays to you and yours. All right, man, let's get right into it. Lots of news going on. The big news, actually not in the UFC octagon, but PFL and Bellator, you could call it merging. Here's technically what's going on. PFL is acquiring Bellator and their roster, so it will now take on the name PFL. Lots of stuff. Lots of kind of moving parts here. The champions are going to fight the champions coming up in 2024 of both divisions. What does this mean, I guess, overall for the sport of mixed martial arts? And should the UFC be worried?
No, the UFC should not be worried. I think it's cool that the PFL and Bellator are coming together because I do think that merges their best talents together, and so you can make some fresher matchups. It feels like every time I'm tuning into PFL, it's getting a little bit redundant on who is usually there at the end of these championships or the end of these tournaments. So I do think that they need a little bit of a fresh coat of paint. I think that they have more innovation as far as like, hey, we're going to go outside the box. We're going to bring in a Jake Paul. We're going to bring in a Francis. So they seem like they're taking more home run cuts. It kind of felt like after Fedor and Chael Sonnen, it doesn't feel like Bellator's really taking those old guys swings anymore. And I don't blame them. They weren't really good money. They didn't really, I don't think made a dent for them. But they do have some really good talent, man. I mean, you know, from the Johnny Eblins of the world and, you know, the AJ McKees, you know, the Usman Nurmagomedovs, you know, they have some really, really talented guys up and down that roster. And so it'll be fun to see them blend with the PFL. But as far as competing with the UFC, no, I don't think that's going to be the case. I just think that maybe instead of being on Showtime, being on ESPN, maybe more people will get to know the names like Johnny Eblin, AJ McKee, Usman Nurmagomedov, get a little bit more of a look at those guys. And, but it is going to be weird. Like Bellator, when it does officially, you know, cease to be Bellator, which I think is going to be after 2024, it sounds like.
Yeah.
That's been around for a long, long time. And it's been, you know, we see the likes of what it's done for a guy like Michael Chandler, Eddie Alvarez, you know, some of the classics that they've had. So it is a little bit sad, even with all the changes they've been through from being run by Bjorn Rebney back in the day. And
right.
It's a little bit sad as a mixed martial arts fan. I don't really look at it though as a threat to the UFC. I think if anything, it just shows, hey, this is going to make a little bit more of an interesting roster. I'm curious to see, you know, what happens to some of their better fighters if they are treated like champions once they really get into the midst of this. Are they going to try and get out of it? I don't know. I don't know really comes to that because it really did feel like for the longest time Bellator was hoping that they could make a bit of a dent for the UFC with, you know, we're going to be the one that sponsors. Let's fighters still have sponsors. We're going to be the ones that are the more fighter friendly promotions. And now you go to the PFL, which is, you know, back to a little bit more of uniformity, which is like everybody's kind of looks the same. So is that go by the wayside? I don't know, but it's interesting. It's going to be fun seeing some of those blends together, but I don't know if anything really captivates us. Oh, I have to see this matchup.
That's the thing is UFC has, and for a long time, has had the best roster, and it's not even close. And you could say, well, what about they didn't have Fedor at this time, or Johnny Eblin's the best at his weight class in the world, whatever. Specifically, maybe that's right. But overall, almost every single weight class, you could say, all right, the UFC has a fighter that would probably win against any of these other promotions. I agree with you, though. Bellator is fun. Bellator had a nice run. Bellator, good play-by-play, fun promotion. The whole setup and the visuals, right, with all the fireworks and the walkout with the ramp. To me, I think that actually this is a good thing for everybody. Maybe not the UFC, but it's a good thing for both Bellator and PFL because they can kind of combine their powers, not just their rosters, but all their ideas, right, and some of their money. You mentioned specifically, real quick, Francis Ngannou and Jake Paul and all that. it feels like they've got now the entertainment side of it down, and they've also got now with Bellator some of the actual fighter, because nobody knows the name Johnny Eblen except for nerds like you and I, but he might be the best. He might be a top 10 fighter in the world, no matter what the promotion is. What I'm telling you is, I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is and it isn't. Like, I think that it shows. Yes, it's going to be great that you make that roster deeper, but it's also kind of showing you, like, hey, you can have some of the best welterweights in the world, the best bantamweights in the world, like, Patchy Mix this past week beating Pettis, and be like, oh, well, that guy's definitely the best 135. Yeah, but the thing is, like, I think, Michael Chandler said this, right? Michael Chandler was like the torchbearer for Bellator for years. And he talked like, once I won in the UFC, it's a game changer. It's just different. It's almost like it's bigger being the UFC, whatever. It's almost looked upon as bigger than just the sport of mixed martial arts. So I just don't know if anybody's going to be able to hold a candle up to it, because, like, look, man, the UFC's been kind of weird lately in that nobody is really a dominant champion anymore. Anybody genuinely can lose. We have not. There used to be a time where, like, oh, we had these guys reigning over, Izzy and Kamaru and, John Jones and all these guys. And, now it's like, you could tell me that Tom Aspinall or any of these guys could go and beat that guy. I mean, like, I'm always going to make the argument of John Jones because I'm pig-headed like that. And I'm not going to just go with the new thing, but it's never felt like the new thing can go beat the best thing ever before than it is in this era. And so while I don't like casting away my goats, because I like to think that there's something to being on the big stage, being the bright lights and all that type of stuff, right now in the UFC, it doesn't seem to matter. Like, you could be reigning forever and you could get upside head kicked, and then all of a sudden we're wondering how good are you going to be.
That's my point, though, is that so at heavyweight, just because you're pig-headed, I'll be the realist voice on this show. John Jones would lose to Francis Ngannou. Francis Ngannou is not in the UFC right now. All right, like, Ngannou would probably beat anybody. Patchy Mix would probably beat any bantamweight in the world right now, and he's not in the UFC. I mean, you talk about a guy like AJ McKee. You talk about a guy like you mentioned Johnny Eblen. So maybe you're right that the UFC has this stranglehold on everybody. What's it going to take then for another promotion to come around and come close if this isn't it?
I honestly think somebody needs a character that's like kind of McGregor-esque. Like, that is just I felt like Bellator had it a little bit with MVP. Like, MVP was like Michael Venom Page would come out there, he'd have a crazy knockout, and not only would he have a crazy knockout, but we'd have to see what is he going to do after he gets the knockout. And I don't feel like Bellator has that right now, and I don't really think the PFL has that necessarily right now. These are all just very, very good fighters, and unfortunately, I feel like to stand out, you need a little bit more of the sideshow, and maybe Jake Paul's going to bring that to the PFL, but as far as the actual fighters on the roster, I don't know.
If you've ever got like 10 minutes, YouTube Michael Venom Page highlights. It is that guy was a character, like you mentioned. He would knock your ass out, and then he would do some great stuff inside that cage. All right. Speaking of all this PFL noise, it looks like maybe Ngannou's first fight, likely to be in 2024. That's almost for sure, as long as he stays healthy. Could be against Deontay Wilder. How much does that wet your whistle?
Oh, I mean, like, I would be thrilled. I'm a little skeptical of it happening. I know Deontay has talked that he is interested in this. I've spoken to him about, before about like, hey, what would it be like? He's like, oh, if I got those 4-ounce gloves on, he's really interested in seeing what that turns into. It would be awesome. And it would be huge, it would be huge onions on Deontay Wilder to actually be a guy of his caliber stepping into the cage. Like, this is a guy who's still looked upon probably as number 2, 3, at least top 5, the bottom top 5 heavyweight in the world. And absolutely, if he were to step into the cage, like, that would be absolutely, this ain't James Toney going up against Randy Couture. Like, this would be an absolute huge deal.
Who hits harder?
I gotta tell you, dude, I'm just going based on usually we say MMA math. This is boxing math. I think I'm gonna go with Tyson Fury just based on how scared he was to go back after Francis. Like I think that he got knocked down and he just looked like he didn't want to deal with him. I've seen him take knockdowns, multiple knockdowns from Deontay Wilder and get back right in the dude's kitchen. And you got to also remember Deontay Wilder's 6'6", but at his heaviest is usually, I think at his heaviest, he's 230, but normally fights in the low 220s, sometimes in the 200 and teens area. It's pretty crazy how lanky he is. And to go in there against a guy like Francis who fights in the 270s, man, I mean, that's a tank he's taking on.
PFL would love this, and quite frankly, they need this. Here's the problem. So whoever fights Francis Ngannou the first time has been guaranteed at minimum a $2 million payday. And then they're also going to get incentives and stuff, so they're going to get a few $1 million out of that. That's great for almost every mixed martial artist. That's nothing for Deontay Wilder. He steps into a boxing ring and he makes 5 times that amount of money pretty much every single time that he fights. So I don't know how enticing it is for him. It feels like it's much better for the promotion than it is for the fighter. Because if they don't get Deontay Wilder, I got to be honest with you, I don't really know what direction they're going to go in. And this is a problem they're about to run into. Let's not pretend like 2024 is that far away, right? We're at the end of November, December, and then boom, we're going to be talking about, all right, it's almost fight time. Who's the guy? If it's not Deontay Wilder, who in the hell would even be a somewhat fun, fair fight for Francis Ngannou? A bear?
Well, that's the thing that goes to it is like you go and acquire this whole promotion and it's like, did you get a better matchup for your number one star? Because I don't necessarily know that
number
you
one,
did.
now what?
Yeah, that's the strange thing about it is like if Francis was a middleweight and you told me, hey, Francis is going to fight Johnny Eblen, I'd be like, all right, it was worth it. You got your fight. Maybe we're the best middleweights in the world. We're the real middleweight championship. And I think that people could say, oh yeah, I think that's a better middleweight championship than even Strickland versus DDP. But Francis is not a middleweight. He's a heavyweight. And so what is the path for him? Where does he go? Because right now it still feels like, you have Tyson Fury's promoter coming out and saying, oh no, they do want to do the rematch. So what's the more enticing thing to see Francis? I think for me, I'd rather see Francis versus Deontay Wilder, but I think the answer is probably the rematch between him and Tyson Fury in a boxing match.
In other news, Dustin Poirier says he wants on that UFC 300 card. Is there an opponent out there that would make sense? We kind of know all the pay-per-view main events leading up to UFC 300. Is there anybody off the tip of your tongue that makes sense for Dustin Poirier to fight if he is part of that card?
Man, good question.
Max?
What makes sense for Dustin Poirier right now? Max is a fun one, obviously, because they're two fan favorites. But he has beaten Max. I mean, he beat Max down when they stepped into the cage with each other. It has been a minute. It has been a minute. Max mentioned this week against he'd like to take on Gaethje for the BMF title. I'm like, that's fresh. I really like that fight. I mean, and so if you're Max Holloway, it doesn't sound like he's all that into the Dustin Poirier rematch. So I don't know, man. Yeah, Dustin is a little bit of a no man's land because, like, you could say, I guess you could do. I don't know, man. I'm looking over it right now, and at lightweight, doesn't seem like there's a lot of great options. I know that him and Conor have been kind of chirping with each other, but not quite sure there. If Colby wins the belt, Colby and him have a bit of heat, so like maybe you could get something of Dustin going up, but Bilal's kind of waiting in the wings. It'd be pretty rotten to screw over Bilal Muhammad. Maybe if Colby loses to Leon, Colby versus Dustin makes a lot of sense.
Oh yeah, like Bilal Muhammad hasn't been screwed over by the UFC before. Quick, Hamzat has been calling out Alex Pereira this week. Is that a fight you'd like to see? Who you got in that one?
Whew, that's a good fight. I think I got Pereira. He's a moose. And I think we've seen, like, look, he's got, obviously there's a big discrepancy on both guys as far as the striking is concerned and as far as the grappling is concerned. And I feel like normally we've usually gone with the grappler, but it does feel like, a lot of these champions having that striking advantage has been the key. I mean, if you can dictate the range and especially gnarl away with those kicks to the leg, a lot of the times you're in a good spot. So I think I would go Pereira to win that fight.
That's BT on the Sports Machine. Don't go anywhere. We're going to keep talking fighting and keep making some more money right here on Tapped Out.
We're back with more Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
And welcome back into Tapped Out. You know that guy, Brendan Tobin, me, the Sports Machine, Sean Levine, and we bring in the best-looking bunch now of the crew. He is Eddie Law from Cage Side Press. Eddie, we now have a new heavyweight champion of the world, and his name is Tom Aspinall. I've been calling that one for a while. It's like you kind of see this coming. He's just a little bit different, right? His speed, his style, his hands. Can anybody beat this guy?
I mean, the obvious answer is John Jones, right? But even that, we're questioning a little bit now, right? Everyone's kind of poking and prodding the lion, which is John Jones. Injured. He's out for, I think, minimum 8 months is what they're saying. So, now everyone's poking at John. Like, hey, fight Tom. We don't want to see Stipe. And no, first of all, no one wanted to see that fight. That was just all for legacy on that one. So now we want to see John Jones, Tom Aspinall. Tom's ability to move like a middleweight and hit like a heavyweight with the speed of a middleweight is scary. No one has it. John Jones doesn't have that kind of movement, right? He's just a freak of nature. But Tom is it's what you get when you start your kid off just strictly training MMA, and then let him grow up that way. So he's phenomenal.
Even if he did fight John Jones, are you sure that Tom Aspinall wouldn't beat him? I think Tom Aspinall is, at this point in their careers, I know this is crazy to say, and you'd probably get good money on Tom Aspinall if that ever came to fruition, plus 150, plus 160. I mean, he's fighting the GOAT. Empty the bank account on Aspinall. I'm telling you, he's better than John Jones right now. Am I crazy?
No, you're on point. I think the one thing about John Jones that has haunted me my entire life of picking against him is that he just finds a way, right? Like we were joking around about Eagles Chiefs a few minutes ago, about how the Eagles they might not be great at football, but they know how to win. They find a way to win. John Jones is the same thing. If you look back at the Lyoto Machida title fight at light heavyweight, Lyoto Machida was doing something super smart. John Jones would go for a kick, and Lyoto had his kick timed so well that he would fire off a straight right and then a flurry, right? And so that was giving John Jones problems. In between rounds, talking to his coach and everything, John realized that that's what was going on, and he countered it perfectly, right? So I'm not going to tell you that Tom Aspinall can't beat him. I would say I would have a hard time believing that's going to happen to a guy like John Jones. But you're right. If you're a betting man, back up the truck, man, on Tom Aspinall, because it could happen.
This Sean Levine is just so adorable because this man will go to hell and high water to defend Jose Aldo being the greatest heavyweight of all time. This dude erases more dudes' legacies by one loss or one win than anybody I've ever met in my life. All of a sudden, Tom Aspinall is better than John Jones. Are you high as a kite, dude?
Right now. I'm not saying his legacy. I'm not saying his overall resume.
Right now, he's got a busted pec. What are you doing? Right now, he goes out there and he beats, Sergey Pavlovich, and also, dude's better than John Jones. Need I remind you, the last time John Jones was in a heavyweight cage, he was popping the neck off of somebody in about 30 seconds. Well,
you're going to eat your words, dude. If they end up
I'm not going to eat my words. It's just hilarious how you go about these things all the time. You're like, Leon, better legacy than Kamaru Usman. And meanwhile, if I dare to mention that Conor McGregor's a better featherweight all time than Jose Aldo, you're like, no. You protect your poor Brazilian baby. You will never allow that to happen. It's amazing.
I can't wait to see how wrong you're going to be when these guys get into the octagon. I'm not suggesting that Tom Aspinall is ever going to be what John Jones is already. John's the best of all time. And even if they got in there and John lost in 10 seconds, I would still tell you John's the best of all time. What I'm telling you right now is Tom Aspinall is a better fighter. You tell me, Eddie, is that Is that a ridiculous opinion to have, or do you think that a lot of people at this point are starting to think maybe if the fight actually did come down, that at this point Tom Aspinall is a better fighter than John Jones? Tell my guy BT I'm not crazy.
Man, I laugh because I'm with BT on this one. It's hard to
What?
say that Tom Aspinall. Look, I'll tell you this. John Jones just came up to heavyweight. Tom Aspinall's been a heavyweight his whole career, right? Obviously, when he's younger, probably a little lighter, whatever. But he's been a heavyweight his whole career. So could you say Tom Aspinall's a better heavyweight right now? Absolutely. Okay. But the thing that John Jones does to guys, man, is they beat themselves before they even get in there with him. Like Cyril Gahn, we never seen Cyril Gahn freeze up the way he did, right? Like it was like he got put in that headlock and then got guillotined right up on the ground with his back on the cage, no guard for John Jones in play or anything. He looked like he looked like Anchorman or I forgot what movie it was where he was like, I don't know what to do with my hands. Like, well, fight the hands, bro. We're all screaming at the TV. John Jones finishes them. It's not necessarily when it's John Jones, Anderson Silva back in his prime. Some say Francis Ngannou now. It's not that you go in there and you can't beat him. It's that you're already thinking in your head, oh my God, the GOAT, the GOAT, the GOAT, the GOAT. When you were fighting Anderson Silva, it's like, oh, it's Anderson Silva, Spider, the GOAT, the GOAT, the GOAT. You already beat yourself. That's why, like, for example, when Nick Diaz went in there against Anderson Silva at 183, and Nick was doing all that funny stuff, laying on the ground, turning his back to arguably the greatest fighter ever, you have to be like that. You have to be a little crazy to go in there and beat him. Now, is Tom Aspinall have that kind of crazy? I think he has. He was talking about it after he beat Sergey, that he was scared. He goes, I have no problem telling you I'm scared. Who else did that? George St. Pierre. So could it happen? Absolutely. But is he a better fighter right now than John Jones? I have a hard time agreeing with that, man. But you never know. Cross fingers, we actually get that fight and find out.
And this is why, by the way, BT, you're going to be able to get like 2-1 at BetMGM plus 180 on Aspinall because of guys like you fellas. And I love it. All right, fire away, Brendan.
Well, what do you think of this, Eddie? Tom had given some voice to the idea that John should be stripped, that he should be the real heavyweight champion. So, A, what do you think of that? And then B, the idea that he doesn't want to wait around 18 months. He'd rather just get in there with Stipe. So what do you think of Tom Aspinall saying that John should be stripped? And what do you think about him versus Stipe?
Poking the bear, poking the lion. That's what he's doing. He's trying to get that John Jones fight. Tom has been saying for years, and I've been fortunate to be able to speak with him before about it. He said that John Jones is my dream fight. It's my dream fight. After he beat Sergey, John Jones, please give me my dream fight. I've reached my dream. Give me my dream fight. You're not going to get John Jones to fight a guy like Tom Aspinall without giving him poking his ego a little bit, right? So you got to say that stuff. You got to say, hey, strip him. I'm the real champ. Strip him, strip him, strip him. And John Jones is already firing back a little bit on Twitter, right? Or X, whatever they're calling it now. So it's, but as a fan, as someone that doesn't want to see the division held back, I wouldn't be mad at that. I mean, Yuri Prochazka did that. Who else dropped the belt? Jamal Hill dropped the same belt,
yeah.
Right? And Jamal, same thing. Long injury, long recovery of injury. Yuri, same thing. John Jones is going to be out, like I said, about 8 months or so. I think he should do it. I don't think he will. And I don't think the UFC wants him to because you still want to try and cash in on that legacy fight between him and Stipe. But who knows, man? There's times where they actually listen to the fans when the fans get loud and say, hey, no, we want Johnny and Tommy. Give us that fight.
All this talk about heavyweights, and we haven't even mentioned the baddest man on the planet, which is Francis Ngannou. Goodness gracious, that guy. I mean, you want to talk about taking a risk on yourself and winning, whether it was going into boxing or PFL. Let's talk about the PFL merger a little bit here with Bellator. Now they've got Ngannou. Now they've got a $2 million bounty automatically forever he fights. The word is maybe that's going to be Deontay Wilder. Jake Paul looks like he's going to get in that smart cage. Can this merger, PFL, Bellator, actually make noise with the UFC?
It'll make noise, but man, the UFC just head and shoulders above everybody else. And it's not like we're rooting against PFL, Bellator, right? Whatever they're gonna go with PFL, but
PFL, yeah.
It's not like we're rooting against. We're not rooting against PFL. I don't think anybody is, especially if you're a media, if you're a fighter. This is a huge deal for you because now you got a second company just brought in, basically doubled their roster, right? And you got a few more opportunities to actually fight and make things happen. So it's a huge deal for fighters, a huge deal for MMA as a whole. But in terms of is it going to compete with the UFC? The UFC is its own monster. It's its own. You almost call it its own sport. You ever joke around with somebody be like, yeah, man, I train UFC. It's MMA, but I train UFC. That's a thing. That's a huge deal. The brand is so massive. Like it does not matter. I don't know if you boys have ever been to a Bellator event, but the in-arena presentation is so much fun at a Bellator event, right? At the UFC, they haven't changed much. It's the same thing. They play the graphics, they play the music, you do a walkout. At a Bellator event, it's fireworks, it's hype. You get everyone excited and everything. The product wasn't there for Bellator at that time yet. Now you have a chance, right? The PFL product I think is going to be really, really good, but I have just a hard time going off of their PFL's past and Bellator's past in terms of actual promotion. That makes me believe that they'll I know Don Davis was saying we want to be the co-leaders. And if everyone sat back, like, I don't know about that, bro. I think you just became the clear number 2, but I don't know if you're gonna be a co-leader. So it's gonna be hard to catch up to the UFC or even make a ton of noise. But you never know, man. It's a lovely game we play of see what happens.
Yeah, I think the thing that's interesting with this is that they go and they acquire Bellator, and still we're scrambling a little bit to find what's that right matchup for Francis. Like, what's the one that's going to stop everybody? It's still you'd have to import a boxer to do that, and I think that's the thing that's the interesting part about this, because he's still your biggest star, but I don't know if there's still that one fight everybody's really jonesing for, even with the Bellator roster. So I guess, what do you do with Francis at this point? If you're PFL, do you want him to go and dust it up with Tyson Fury again, or do Deontay Wilder in boxing, or is that like the big holdup that you could get Deontay to be the first real, prime boxer to cross over in a long time?
Yeah. So Francis, Jake Paul, I don't know about Clarissa Shields, but they have that super fight division is what they're calling it. So you don't bring in an MMA fighter that's no one can name the number 1 ranked heavyweight, honestly. No offense to anybody. I apologize if anyone gets upset at PFL, but nobody is going to be able to tell you who the number 1 and number 2 heavyweight at PFL after Ngannou is. So what do you do with Ngannou? Super fight. Deontay Wilder comes in. All right, let's go. Hell, if you want to get crazy, get Andy Ruiz in there. Why not? Like, you got to make it fun. Those super fights have to be fun. That's a division that has to sell. It's all about selling. With Jake Paul, everyone's like, oh, give him a year. He wants to fight Nate Diaz in the smart cage. And it's just like anyone that's been watching MMA at all will tell you that, yeah, sure, Jake won the boxing match, 100%, totally true. But I think Nate gets in there and takes his neck. But, Deontay Wilder, man, that's the fight I want to see.
If I made you Dana White for a weekend and you had the choice of being able to go hat in hand and do a crossover fight and do John versus Francis, would you do it, or do you think your pride would be too much to do it?
That's a good question.
If I'm Dana White, so you're telling me if I'm actually Dana White, not if I have Dana White's job, right?
Whatever answer it how you want to answer it. Just like, would you make the crossover fight, or do you think your pride would be too much and it'd be like people will forget about him? He doesn't have a good option in MMA anyway.
If I'm Dana White, the actual person, no way do I do that. There's no reason to make that crossover happen, because I'm not getting anything out of it, right? PFL's fishing; they're going for it. They're baiting in case Dana somehow loses his mind one day and does it, because win or lose, PFL gets recognition off of that. They get legitimacy off of that. As legitimate as we all know and believe they are, the casual fan doesn't see that. They don't believe that, right? So I don't do it if I'm Dana White. If I had Dana White's job, that'd have been done already. Who doesn't want to see Francis Ngannou, John Jones in a crossover? All right. Me personally, I'm like, look, who wins that fight?
Who wins?
I have no idea. Like, I have no idea. I thought Tyson Fury was going to embarrass Francis Ngannou, and you should see me fall off the couch after the first round. Not even after he knocked him down. After the first round, I'm like, all right, Francis, let's go. What we got, right? I had it on the background. I was barely paying attention because I was working. I think it was a UFC event. I don't remember, but as soon as he started moving a little better, I'm like, Francis Ngannou's moving his head. What is going on right now? This is wild. Then he drops him. I'm like, yo. And the first thing was the same thing I think everyone else thought was, forget Tyson Fury. If he fights John Jones like this, what can happen? So who knows? That'd be a hard one to pick. I can't even tell you, John. I can't give you a pick on that one. I'd be sitting
I'll
in the
tell
back
you.
just like I just want
I'll tell you, boys. Francis
to what?
Ngannou would beat him the same way that Tom Aspinall would beat him. But we're out of time, so we can't argue that anymore. That is our guy, Eddie Law. Follow him at ELaw32 at Cage Side Press. Good friend of the show. We'll bring you on as soon as we possibly can. Thanks, man.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Where Sean Levine will step into the cage with Brendan Tobin in Are You Gonna Fight Me?
I'm gonna fight your ass!
Here on Tapped Out.
That's right, fight me like a man.
Only on the BetQL network.
You know the rules. I want a good, clean fight. When I tell you to break, I want you to step back out my command and break. Now go back to the corner and come out fighting at the bell.
And welcome back into a Thanksgiving week edition of Tapped Out. We appreciate you checking us out. However you got us on YouTube, the BetQL network, the Odyssey app. We appreciate it. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. And you know what? Most of the time during Thanksgiving, it's all peace, love, and sometimes a little bit of turkey and stuffing. But here on this show, it's constantly fighting. So hopefully you got your gloves on. Meet me in the middle of the octagon. Here we go. You're going to fight me if I say Leon versus Colby coming up next as far as pay-per-views go, 296, December 16th. If somebody gets knocked out, it's more likely to be Colby. You going to fight me?
No, I'm not going to fight you on that. I feel like, Colby's path always is a decision. That's usually how he goes about these things, is wearing guys out. I mean, the idea that he'd have something crazy up his sleeve, like a flying knee or catch Leon, I just think that'd be a little bit far-fetched for me. Not even sure what the method odds on that, but I got to imagine Colby by knockout's got to probably be the longest method there is in the fight. Out of all the props.
I think Colby, I understand what you're saying, that if you're thinking what I'm asking is one punch, kind of what Leon did to Usman, kicked him in the head, or we've seen Leon knock guys out with one-shot power. Colby doesn't have that. Colby's more like, I guess, like a Diaz brother, punches and bunches. That doesn't mean he can't finish the fight by knockout, or shall I say TKO. I don't know if you found those odds, but I'm actually a little bit interested in that. And I agree with you. Somebody is more likely to get knocked out. Leon clearly is the guy to knock out Colby. But I disagree with kind of the where you're leaning. I do think Colby can finish this fight by knockout.
I don't know, man. It's just not usually his it's not his path. It's not like usually the way he goes about it in finishing these things. The last finish he had that wasn't an injury was 2016. That's a long time, man. That's just usually, it's not how he goes about the things. He usually wears guys out. I mean, he had the Woodley thing where Woodley had the rib injury, but usually it's Colby dusting people in a decision. That's how he goes about it.
You're kind of crushing my point here with facts, aren't you? Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Wonder Boy is also that night. Shavkat undefeated. Wonder Boy, your guy and friend of the show. He's going to get his ass kicked that night. You're going to fight me if I say Shavkat's still underrated. Like, he honestly might be one of the top 5 best fighters in the UFC.
No, not going to fight you. I do think that he's criminally underrated. I don't even know if the Wonder Boy fight is a good fight for him to shed that label, because I just don't think that. First of all, I think everybody looks at Wonder Boy, like most people, a little bit long in the tooth. That's my guy. I also do like Rakhmonov, though, even though you disrespect his hat. I don't know. I just feel like there's not going to be a lot of trash talk leading up to this. The only, if he really butchers him and finishes him quick, I think maybe that'll get a lot of people's attention. But it's I still think that he is in that realm of being looked upon as underrated.
Kind of weird that either guy took this fight, isn't it? Because like Wonder Boy, obviously he had his chance last time. Guy missed weight, didn't want to take the fight. Completely understand that. He thinks he's in good enough shape, so get a fight as soon as you can. And if you beat Shavkat, I suppose maybe your next fight's for the title, and then we have to give you your flowers. I don't think any of that's going to happen. But for Shavkat, kind of risky fighting a striker like this. You're coming in as like a 4-1 favorite. You're right. By beating Wonder Boy that night, I'm not exactly sure what he gains. It feels like Stephen Thompson has a lot more to win that night.
I agree with that, but then, you look at the welterweight rankings and there's not a lot of places he could have gone because the only people who are ranked above him right now, Gilbert, he's hurt. Colby's fighting for the belt. Right, Wonder Boy's 6th, so he's right behind him.
Wow, okay.
Colby's fighting for the belt. Bilal, we know he's waiting in the wings for his title shot, and then Kamaru just fought at middleweight. So there's not a lot of great options for Shavkat for guys who are there. I think the thing that's going to be interesting is if Ian Gary ends up winning, do we end up getting maybe a showdown of both of them? Because, I think both of their names with wins will be really hot coming off of this, and they'll be kind of looked upon as that next wave. But yeah, I don't know. It, as close as it is in the rankings, it's still a guy ranked below him. It's a guy who's a lot older than him. It's his contender days do seem a little bit behind him. And if Stephen Wonderboy Thompson wins, I mean, hell, your boy may not be looking so stupid as far as maybe getting a title shot soon.
Well, you're still going to be looking stupid, but that particular opinion might not be wrong. I get where you're going. UFC 297, the first of next year, is Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis. I'm a big fan of both these guys because I always bet on them and I always make money on them. Especially du Plessis, who's been an underdog in his last 3 fights. I'm very curious to see what this fight goes off at fight night. Feels pretty close to a pick 'em, in my opinion. I think du Plessis beats him. You going to fight me?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. It's just I'm so fascinated with the way Sean won the belt. I mean,
he looked so
it's
good.
hard not to have. Yeah, it's hard not to have just the highest opinion of him because it's not just that he beat Stylebender. We've seen that. I mean, hell, we've seen Stylebender lose to Jan. We've seen Stylebender lose to Pereira, but we've never seen him lose at his own game. And so for Sean to go win it, that was Cody Garbrandt against Dominic Cruz. Like, that was just that styles make fights. Cody had an unbelievable, you know what I'm talking about. That night, Kobe just beat his ass for every single round. All 5 took his belt. And Sean Strickland did that like you're talking about. And then going forward, it was like Cody's good and he's cool and he's got great tattoos, but he's not the guy. I hate to say it. I think that's kind of what Sean Strickland is. I think he had an unbelievable fight against Adesanya. The big difference for me on that, though, is you had a Cody Garbrandt who won the belt very, very young. Sean Strickland is a guy who's been around. This is not a guy who has been, skyrocketed to the top. And then, that he's very, that he's got, still some things to learn. And that we obviously knew that Cody seemed to have a very vulnerable chin. Now, we've seen Sean knocked out before, but I just think that his experience, it feels just very much like he took a lot of his early warts. Hell, not that long ago, he was looking up at the lights because of Alex Pereira, and look at him now. He's the champion of the world.
Pereira knocked his ass out. I actually had money on Strickland that night. All right, UFC 298, Volkanovski versus Ilya Topuria. You're going to fight me, and I know this is a little bit crazy because we're both huge Volkanovski guys on this show. He's come on the show. We had a lot of fun with him. I'm worried about him, man, in that fight versus Ilya. I'm going to take Ilya as an underdog only because it's a quick turnaround, and he got knocked the F out, man. You're going to fight me if I say perfect timing for Ilya to win that night.
I don't disagree with you saying that he's catching Volk at a good time because obviously Volkanovski is coming off of a very devastating knockout. But this, again, kind of goes to I'm not going to just throw out Alexander Volkanovski's run and say, oh, now all of a sudden he's vulnerable. I think that he took a big swing. Was it a smart decision for him to go fight Islam? Probably not. I think that his cockiness probably got the best of him because he's like, I beat this guy. Nobody thought I could. But to do it, cold was probably not the smartest decision. I still think that At featherweight, this guy seems like he's head and shoulders, his giant ass head and shoulders above everybody. And I think it's a big jump for Taporia too. Taporia is going right into the deep end basically with Volkanovski, who, when he does have a little bit of adversity, does seem like he bounces back in a big way. I guess the only thing that you have to worry about with Volk is this too quick a turnaround?
And he got kicked in the head. 299 UFC. O'Malley versus Cheeto 2. Styles make fights. Cheeto beat him the first time. Well, according to me, not according to O'Malley. He tells us he's still undefeated. You're going to fight me if I say Cheeto's a live wire again?
Not going to fight you because he's just a very devastating knockout artist. Like, he knows how to pull off big finishes.
He'll kick you in the head too.
He'll kick you right in the head, But I think the thing that makes me a little bit dubious as opposed to the last time around is I do think that, one, you're not going to catch Sean O'Malley sleeping. He knows how to seriously to take Cheeto Vera now. Two, I just think that you have a Cheeto Vera who's, been a little bit inconsistent every time he gets into the cage. It's just like, what are we going to get? Well, not only what fight is he going to show up, what round is he going to show up? Is he going to show up on Cheeto time, which is going to be like in the 5th round? Is he going to show up late? Is he going to show up at all? You never really know with him. And I think that if you're going to go fight for a championship, you'd like to be a little bit more steady. You'd like to be, even going on an incline, not plateauing. And it feels like with Cheeto, it's almost like a roller coaster. Like, you don't know. Is he up? Is he down? Is he up and down? Is he going to come out this round? Is he going to be gun shy this round? What is he going to be like this round? I don't know. We never know with him. He's a coin flip.
We never know. A couple of weeks away from UFC Austin, and then the final pay-per-view card of the year that we just talked about, Colby and Leon headlining that one. So let's talk a little football for a minute. This week, my Chiefs went down to the Eagles on Monday Night Football. Right now at BetMGM, you've got 3 teams that are co-favorites to win the Super Bowl. Those Eagles, those Chiefs, and the San Francisco 49ers. You're going to fight me if I say I think we saw last night that Philly should be the Super Bowl favorites.
I mean, hard to argue. They've already beaten the Chiefs and the Dolphins. And, if you have those guys on your resume, look, all I hear on sports talk radio down in South Florida is how the Dolphins can't beat a good team. If you're the Eagles, you not only have one loss, strangely, to the Jets, but it's you got probably the two top hides on your wall right now with the Dolphins and the Chiefs. So yeah, I think anybody else being the best right now, it's like kind of arguing like who's the best quarterback. It's obviously Mahomes right now. I think it's kind of obviously the Eagles. I don't know who really has a good who has a good argument aside them.
By the way, you sit in Miami, I sit in Kansas City. So like you said, what are we going to say when it comes to Philadelphia? They got both of our squads. By the way, you talk about that Miami sports radio down there. Very questionable. All those guys. Brendan Tobin, Sports Machine, Sean Levine. Talk a little fighting here on the BetQL network. Speaking of best quarterback, when it comes to MVP, Jalen Hurts the favorite at BetMGM. He's 2-1 right now, or plus 250 if you want to be accurate. Your guy Tua is 5-1. My guy Mahomes is 5-1. Lamar and Purdy round out the top 5. You're going to fight me if I say, I think it's Jalen Hurts that takes home the MVP.
I mean, if they keep this up with the record, it's obviously going to go to a team that has 1-2 losses. I think that's going to be a hard thing to deny. I think Tua, the Dolphins' offense has been slowed up the last few weeks. So, the days of the video game numbers, he needs to get back on the page with that. Because a lot of the times these last couple of weeks, it's been pretty much all Tyreek Hill or nothing for them. So I do think that if you are a believer in Tua, still getting that MVP, it might be a good time to pounce on him because he's been right there as 1 and 2. So his value is probably as good as it's been in a long time.
Thanksgiving week, you're going to fight me if I say, if you eat either cranberries from a can or stuffing, you're nasty.
No, not going to fight you. But if you are going to do it, it has to be from a can. I don't want to, don't try and home ec class it and try and make it, look like some kind of sauce. Just get the gelatinous, right? Like, it still have the ridges in it, and the cheapest kind too. I'm talking like, I don't know what supermarket you have in Kansas. I don't know what supermarket you have in Kansas City, Sean. We have Publix down here. Publix brand cranberry sauce, so you can see the can jiggles when it gets out of the can. That's the way it's got to go.
Dylan's is our chain that we have here. Last one, Thanksgiving style. You're going to fight me if I say pumpkin pie, clearly the king of all pies.
Ridiculous statement. Nobody likes
What?
pumpkin pie. I mean, you
What?
seem as weird as can be. Yeah. How many
Year-round,
pies
love
can I
that
go through
stuff.
before? Why?
Oh,
It's
listen
not
to you. What do
sweet.
you
It's like a
you're gonna
bad
tell me,
cousin of
oh,
sweet
give me some
potato pie.
chocolate cream, give me some banana. This guy, pecan pie, sweet potato pie. Keep all
Apple?
that crap, man. Apple pie's good. Apple pie's good.
Of course,
I'll give you that.
It's the king of
It's not
pies.
pumpkin.
Key lime
It is
pie
not
down
the
here in
king.
South Florida. Have you ever had key lime pie?
I have had key lime pie. It's disgusting. Way too sweet.
Oh,
Terrible.
get out of here. Whatever.
I would rather have banana cream pie. I would rather have pie with
Okay.
nothing inside of it. I would rather just eat the crust. But I'll give you apple pie as number 2. It's not the king, it's the queen. We all know the king is pumpkin pie. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. Coming up next, we keep talking a little fighting and we keep making some money right here on Tapped Out.
We're back with more Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
Final segment of Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin. I am the sports machine, Sean Levine. We've got UFC Austin coming up in just a couple of weeks. December 2nd is the date for that one. At the top of the marquee, Beneil Dariush, underdog BT against Arman Tsarukyan. Right now, Tsarukyan is a 2-1 favorite at BetMGM, minus 210. You can get Beneil Dariush at plus 170. I think I'm going to empty the piggy bank on Beneil Dariush that night.
Is that because you were charmed by him? Is that like you feel like, you want to go with our guy because you want to root for Benny? He was a very nice man.
He was a nice guy. He was a different kind of interview than we usually do. But yes, I very much enjoyed Beneil Dariush. And the truth is, I've made a lot of money on Beneil Dariush, especially by knockout over the years. And I think he knocks out Arman Tsarukyan.
I like Tsarukyan in this one, but Beneil was knocking on the door of that championship shot. I mean, it felt like he was going to be right there. And I think that he gave a little voice to this, that he knows that he not only has to win, but he has to be sensational doing it because he feels they don't want somebody like him atop. But I don't know if that's the case anymore. I think that we've seen that with, Sean Strickland and how he's kind of been as champion. People have dug that. So you know, you never quite know once you get to the top how people are going to react to you. But I still like Sarukian's skills going into this one, man. The dude's an absolute monster, and I think he gets the best of Benny.
Two guys that are very fun to listen to and have worked their way up pretty close to title shots. Not anymore. Bobby Green versus Dan Hooker. It's crazy because if you just told me, hey, these guys are going to fight each other, I'd say, sweet, that's a pick 'em. And I love pick 'em fights. Plus 140 right now, underdog money on Bobby Green, minus 170 for Dan Hooker. Who's going to pay that? You're not that guy, are you?
I'm not. No, I like the value in Bobby Green there.
Right.
Although, like, Dan Hooker has looked better as of late. You know, this is a guy that I think people thought was like contender good, and then, you know, went through some stumbles. He has a little bit of that. Usually always will have moments in fights where he looks spectacular. It's just about him getting to the finish line. And Bobby Green is got some of that in him too, but I just think that this fight should probably be a lot closer to the Dan Hooker being, you know, nearly minus 200 on this one. Like, no, I think that Bobby Green, there's value in that. He's got absolute hammers, and Dan Hooker can be had.
This is a great card, by the way. Working our way down. Davison Figueiredo. All these could be fight night main events. Davison Figueiredo versus Rob Font. Same thing. I know he's fighting up a weight class. Plus 155 underdog money on Davison Figueiredo. Rob Font, great jab, minus 185. Where's your money going?
I still like Rob Font in this. I have a lot of questions about Figueiredo, especially coming up in weight. You know, I know this is something he's probably been waiting for. He's been tired, I'm sure, of the Moreno rivalry. It's been kind of consuming his career over the last few years, but it's a big ass big jump. He's taking on a vet who's been there, done that, been in there with everybody. So I think Rob Font, you know, even though you got to pay a little bit more, I might look into some of the props that night and see where they're at as far as that's concerned, but I just like him better than Figueiredo coming into this one.
You want veterans? I got veterans, and I got to pick them for you at BetMGM. Who you like in the Kelvin Gastelum Sean Brady fight?
Man, that's a tough one because I really, really like Sean Brady. And I'm not going to hold against him that, you know, he came up short against Bilal. I think that Bilal, you know, could be champion very, very soon. And Sean Brady, I think people have been thinking this guy's going to be groomed to be champion. I think Kelvin Gastelum's such a wild card. You just never know. I think it's just a little bit risky to put your money on him because, you know, you could feel good about it. You might feel like there's value in that. But then, like, all of a sudden, dude, you get to a point where, oh, we have this version of Kelvin Gastelum tonight, and you feel like a fool. You know, it's a little bit of an empty feeling. So I am going to go with Sean Brady. I like his prospects a little bit better. I feel like I'm getting a little bit more of a sure thing, even if he is coming off of a tough loss. Kelvin, it just feels like a roll of the dice.
And then every now and again, you get the Kelvin that night versus Adesanya, where he was just awesome. Misha Tate versus Julia Avila, minus 150. Again, I can't believe good underdog money on Misha Tate at plus 125. You playing the dog that night?
No, I'm not. Misha Tate, it's a great story, and that's great and all, but I'm going to go with Julia in this one. That's my early lean. Although it's been great seeing Misha make her come back and get back into the sport. I'm not putting my money on her that night.
This is such a fun card. Again, Beneil Dariush, Arman Sarukian, Bobby Green, Dan Hooker, Davison Figueiredo, Rob Font, Kelvin Gastelum, Sean Brady, Misha Tate, Julia Avila, and then you've also got Clay Guida versus Joaquin Silva. Guida, an underdog, I think, for like the 7th fight in a row, plus 175. Silva minus 225. Tell me you're taking the Carpenter underdog money.
It's just fun to, right? Like,
right,
that's one of those where it's just like I'll sprinkle a little something on him just because you feel un-American if you don't. Like, if you're going to root against Clay Guida, although I do miss the luscious locks of course of yesteryear, but who doesn't want to bet on Clay Guida? If you don't, I would just stay away from the fight because you it's blood money. Basically.
I mean, honestly, let's be honest. None of our hair is what it was one day. Oh, I miss that stuff. Well, you actually still got a pretty good head of hair. You're doing all right there.
Thanks, man.
All right. Black Friday fights. I love it. So, like, usually Thanksgiving, you think family and maybe a little football. Well, now we've got fighting coming up on Black Friday, PFL style. You were talking about during the break how excited you are for this event.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, it's got a couple of fun twists to it. I think number one, Derek Brunson. Like, if you guys didn't, Derek Brunson's in the PFL now, so you guys could see him against Ray Cooper, who's one of their former champions, is moving up in weight. Missed weight in his last fight. guy who does not have a ton of personality. I mean, like it's like talking to a brick. That's also because he hits like a brick. And so I just think it's a fascinating matchup between him and Derek. And you get Derek as a dog that night. I think that just because you're coming over from the UFC, like it doesn't necessarily mean it works out for you. Like Rory McDonald has had his ups and downs. But I do think that, between the size, the guys that Derek Brunson's taken on, Ray Cooper, all the best guys that he's taken on have been a little bit long in the tooth and have been a little bit worn out. I just think there's value in Derek Brunson that night, so I'm going to be putting my money on him. I think it's fascinating. We have to return to Kayla Harrison, who's coming off of her first career loss, taking on Aspen Ladd, who got cut by the UFC because of all her damn weight issues. And she's a monster dog coming into this. So if you maybe are worried about Kayla, who, talks a lot about her mental struggles as far as like, how does she handle the loss, all that stuff. But I mean, as far as tangibles are concerned, she's one of the best. I don't even want to call her prospects because she's 33, but there's not a whole lot of holes there when it comes to Kayla Harrison, which is why she's minus 750 on the night. So, be warned, like maybe go in there and start seeing like, yeah, what does a quick finish look like or that? But I think that Kayla Harrison is coming into this one with a big statement to make. And then Olivier Aubin Mercier.
God bless you.
Thank you. Taking on Clay Collard, who's like one of their just solid guys. Clay Collard's, always usually makes live fun fights, but Mercier's never lost in the PFL, which is why he's at where he's at right now. So I think the only dog that I like out of these fights is probably Derek Brunson making his move over there, getting Ray Cooper in a new weight class and coming off of some weight issues, some first struggles of his career in a while. But it's still gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting to see what this broadcast brings as far as the whole Bellator announcements. Because the only thing I'll say with the PFL though, dude, you guys got to keep the pace of these fights better. I mean, it is ridiculous how long I have to wait for fights. I don't know what they're stretching out. When I watch a PFL fight, it's like a PFL card. Good God, do I feel like it's, we love our boy Sean O'Connell. I feel like this dude is doing goat yoga out there with how much he has to stretch between fights. Like, it's ridiculous how many interviews they got to do. Just get to the fights. There's a lot of sports going on Black Friday. Bing, 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 bing. Give me fights.
I feel like you're knocking goat yoga, but haven't tried it. And from a guy that did it one time, this girl was like, hey, you want to go? It was a first date. She said, do you want to go do yoga? At first, actually, here's how it went down. She texted me and she asked me if I was a yogi. And I was like, I had to look it up. I'm like, what do you mean, am I a yogi? That doesn't make any sense. And then I found out that means that's somebody that does yoga. And I said, no, but I would give it a shot. And we went and did it. And next thing I know, I've got a goat on my back as I'm stretching. Have you tried it?
No, why would I want a farm animal on me while I was stretching?
I feel like maybe that's a Midwest thing. That's the difference between you beach folk out there in Miami, Florida, and me here in Kansas City. Like, goat yoga is if I'm gonna do yoga, damn it, there better be goats around or some sort.
It's probably fair. The last time I was out in nature, my wife and I went over to one of the island beaches here. Just massive swarms of jellyfish. So everybody's got their weird thing they got to deal with.
Gator yoga is just not the same as goat yoga. It sounds risky and somewhat fun, but it's just not the same. And I saw that iguana that you caught with your son a few months ago. Bro, that thing was the size of my dog. I don't think you're supposed to touch those, are you?
They always say they have salmonella, but here's the problem. I'm not going to let them just come onto my yard, and burrow and cause some kind of issues. Like, they need to know they're not allowed around these parts. And I could be mean and like use an air rifle on them, but I'm not going to. I'm going to catch and release and get the hell. I'm going to throw them over my fence and be like, stay out of here.
What a guy. Make it the neighbor's problem. By the way, last Saturday night, did you make any money on Brendan Allen? He subbed the Bear Jew, Paul Craig, in round 3. I actually had by sub, but I had Paul Craig.
I did not make money because I had Brendan Allen, but I had him by knockout because I figured these guys were going to I thought they were going to stand and bang, which was a little bit of what we got. But, man, that was a fun grappling exchange by a lot of them. And Brendan Allen's been on a roll, dude. He's been calling out Sean Strickland this week. Of course, Strickland beat him back in the day. So it's a rematch, but he's won 6 straight. He looks really, really good. Once, I think it was Robert Whitaker. And did he call? Who the hell else did he call? Did he call out Hamzat? I think he called out Hamzat too. Both fun matchups. I think he wants either one of those guys at 300. I think that would be either one of those matches would be fun for Brendan Allen.
Not that you asked, but I made some money that night on Chase Hooper subbing Jordan Levitt in round 1. I actually pinned the tail on the donkey on that one. I had him subbing by round one. I think I got like 12-1 or something at BetMGM. That was a nice little payout. All right. That's it for the show. Happy Thanksgiving to everybody out there. For our producer, Jake Noaker, and my co-host, Brendan Tobin, enjoy the best of all pies, pumpkin, and stay away from that stuffing and those cranberries. That stuff's nasty. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. We'll talk to you next week right here on Tapped Out.